We're looking at our highly interactive mind body and the brain mind bodies of others, our biology. And this is another of our inquiries based on Gabor Mate's new book, The Myth of Normal. And he has a chapter called Our Highly Interactive Biology. Some of these things we know. We know that our brain and our minds are not independent, that we really have this interconnected nature within ourselves. And a lot of our work around healing trauma and being happy, and certainly meditation and spiritual depth, comes from realizing that. So it's good to look at the different layers of that. I think with meditation, what really stops us from going deep into meditation are that we have some obstacles. Some of them, a lot of them, are the thoughts in our mind. And some of it is just that we're disconnected from ourselves and from each other. We've forgotten the connections that are here. And then as we learn about the polyvagal theory and the biology of how we interbe, then it makes sense. It's like, oh, okay, I'm not going to argue with that, of course. The more we are closer to somebody, the more we're affected by each other. And we know that from personal experience for sure. Because children are depending on regulated adults to help them develop a regulated nervous system, they're a lot more vulnerable. So if we're thinking about ourselves as an adult too, maybe thinking about if you're angry with your boss, or if you feel like your boss is angry with you, someone who has power over you, it's going to be more important to you than it would be as if it was someone on the same level of power or someone with less power than you have. A few weeks ago, we looked into social location and proximity to power, and that's part of how this works. And we also are learning from our own experience, of course, and also some of the research now, that loneliness or being separated from the bodies of other people has a really damaging effect on us. COVID has made that a lot more serious. So we're working with all of these levels, our mind, body, we're linking in. We know that our mind bodies are shaped by things outside of us. So this picture here is by a Nova Scotia photographer, Jerry Katz. And when we're at a place like that, when we're at a place in nature where it's safe and calm, our physiology is affected by that. Our breath slows, our shoulders soften. We know that from our experience as well. So some of the research about this is about how it works genetically. So I thought I'm not going to go into a lot of it because it's not relevant in some ways in order to convince ourselves. We don't have to convince ourselves. We know this is true. But the telomeres, Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn is one of the researchers who's looking into telomeres. And telomeres have to do with our chromosomes, and the longer they are, or the shorter they are, so they're shortened by poverty, racism, urban blight, any kind of stress. And they're understanding a lot more now about how genes work and how what they call epigenetic processes act on the chromosomes. So just as we might know from experience that when we bring our attention into our body and take a few deep breaths, that our experience softens, they're looking at what's going on in the background. And they're finding these large populations of people who have more stress, socioeconomic stress, discrimination. It leads to higher inflammation. And it's the higher inflammation that seems to lead to aging and illness. So this is a biology, some of the background on that. So this is a quote. This front part of it here is that even when we have bad news, it could give way to something empowering if, when we're learning about the impacts of adversity, number one, we might take that more seriously. But also that leads us to find the pathways to healing. So if we know that inflammation is caused in part by the external stressors in our world, it's also partly caused by the way that we respond to them and what's going on in our mind around them. And then we have these ways of inquiry and healing And that knowing that this is how that works is something we might put more mindfulness into, more practice into. So let's pause now and do a somatic mindfulness inquiry. I'll just say the sentences. You can sit back if you want and just listen, or you can read them on the screen. And bring to mind life experiences, but also people that have had a negative impact on your biology. It's not usually that hard for us to come up with some of those. Notice what's here, what comes up. Maybe it was a teacher that yelled at you at school, or bullies, or somebody who didn't even bother getting to know you, someone who looked at you with contempt. And then just notice what's happening in your body as you're bringing that to mind. And as you're doing that, remain aware that right now you're in your own body. You're here in this moment where that's not actually happening. So, what was happening in the moment was a lot more powerful and intense than what might be happening as you remember it. And yet, there's still a response to it. So, notice, bring yourself out of that now. You don't have to spend a lot of time there. We all know this, we know it from our own experience. And now, let's bring to mind people or circumstances that have a positive impact on how you feel, how your body feels, the amount of tension in your body. Are you holding your breath? Are you taking a deeper breath? Bring to mind people who have the opposite effect, who have a positive impact on how you feel in your body. And let's really focus in here. Bring it up visually. You might notice an image of somebody. It might be a landscape, like that beautiful picture of the ocean. Maybe it's a place in your backyard or in a park. Might be your dog, your horse. And let yourself really feel into it. Might be waking up in the morning with the sunshine on the bed and not having to get up and rush to work. And then come back out of the inquiry now and just come back to neutral. So we're experiencing negative impact and positive impact. So knowing this, what now? So how could you bring this knowing more into your daily life? I know we all do this all the time already, but just knowing, okay, that person, that experience, if it's only in my past, then we might work on resolving the impact of that. Oftentimes, these things are present in our life in other ways too. Even if we're no longer living with someone who flies off the handle, we might be in public spaces with someone who's doing that. So it kind of activates us again. Or even if we've had a person who we really loved being around and they're not in our life so much anymore, or not at all, just in our heart, maybe. How could you bring more of what is softening and nurturing and helps to build resilience into your life? How could you get rid of some of what is harmfully stressful and bring in more that's exciting or makes you feel more creative? Let yourself really feel into that. Notice your whole body, your breath. And then think about one or two things that you might be able to put into action right away. So it might be that when we break into the small groups, that you might want to share something with somebody and then you could feel into that. What does that feel like in my biology? And it could also be a practice of noticing interbeing. Just right now, as you're tuning into this, notice your body mind, the space your body is in. Notice the space all around you. And there's this shared digital space as well, where we're engaging in something together. We're listening to the same words, although we all have our own individual response to that. When we think about something that's integrating or connecting, we tend to have a more relaxed body, our breath gets smoother. And if you're somewhere where you can look outside as well, what is it around you, either in your space, indoors or outdoors? I can see trees and sky. I know there's oxygen there that's helping me. What else is there here? And we notice that our mind might bring in warnings. Well, I don't really want to share with somebody, or I don't know if it's safe to take the risk to say this thing. It's really important to me because in the past, when that's happened, someone's made fun of me, or I felt really like the oddball and weird. I haven't been included. Or maybe when I think about the trees, I get really distressed by climate change. So I'm not appreciating the oxygen. I'm really worried about our environment. And if that's the case, what could you do with others? We have our own personal response to that, and we might drive our car less or something. But what could you possibly do with others where you could get together and create more positive experiences in your biology together as well as your own? Let's give that a moment too. We have a lot we can do in our own personal biology. We could relax our muscles, work on that continuity, the ease in the breath, and we can work in the interbeing field as well. We're all connected in many, many ways. My meditation teacher, Swami Veda, would say the greatest gift you can give the world is a peaceful mind. Imagine that coming from here, radiating out into everyone that you come into contact with, whether it's in person, online. Let yourself radiate and share the peaceful mind. And as we do that, it comes back. It's not a one way, it's an interaction, an interbeing. We could let ourselves feel that again. Whenever we're disconnected, we can come back into connection with ourselves and from there into connection with everything that is.